The thick cream envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. At 31, I am a successful architect who built a life from nothing, but seeing my brother Nate's wedding invitation unleashed a flood of memories I had spent 19 years trying to forget. The handwritten note inside from my parents brought back that night when I was 12, abandoned at a gas station 80 miles from home, forced to sleep behind a dumpster because I was not man enough for my father. Before I share how my family abandoned me and how I survived that night behind a dumpster, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you have ever had to rebuild your life after someone broke your trust. Growing up in rural Montana shaped more than just my accent. Our modest two-story house on the outskirts of Livingston looked normal from the outside, complete with a tire swing and a golden retriever named Buck. But inside those walls I learned early that nothing I did would ever be good enough for my father, Richard Coleman. Dad was ex-military, served 8 years in the Marines before settling into construction work. He brought his military discipline home, enforcing daily inspections of our rooms and punishing infractions with physical exercise or the removal of privileges. Discipline builds character, he would say whenever I complained. The world is tough. I am preparing you for it. My mother Diane was a kindergarten teacher, beloved by her students, but a ghost in our home. She floated around the edges of our family life, never contradicting Dad, never interfering when his lessons went too far. Her silence was its own form of betrayal. Then there was my brother Nate, 4 years younger than me. Where I was bookish and reserved, Nate was naturally athletic and outgoing, effortlessly winning the approval that I desperately sought. Dad called him the natural, while I was usually the disappointment. The summer I turned 12, Dad decided we needed a proper family vacation to strengthen our bonds and teach us survival skills. We packed our station wagon for a weekend camping trip to Yellowstone National Park, a 4-hour drive from our home. The first day went surprisingly well with Dad, in unusually good spirits, as we set up camp and grilled hot dogs under the stars. The trouble started on the second day when we hiked to a swimming hole Dad had discovered during his own childhood. It featured a 30-foot cliff that overlooked a deep section of the lake. Without hesitation, Dad stripped down to his shorts, whooped loudly, and jumped. Seconds later, he surfaced with a triumphant yell calling for Nate to follow. My 8-year-old brother hesitated only briefly before making the leap, his small body seeming to hang in the air forever before splashing down. When he surfaced, Dad clapped and cheered, declaring him a true Coleman man. Then all eyes turned to me. I walked to the edge and looked down. My stomach immediately tightened into knots. The water seemed miles away and dark thoughts filled my head. What if I hit a rock? What if the current was stronger than it looked? What if I panicked mid-air? "Come on," Ansel, Dad called up impatience, already edging into his voice. "Your little brother just did it. Do not be a coward." I backed away from the edge. "I will swim from the shore," I called down. Dad's face darkened instantly. "Get down here. Now." I shook my head, tears threatening. "I cannot. I am scared." Those 3 words violated the cardinal rule of the Coleman household: never admit weakness. Pathetic, Dad spat. Absolutely pathetic. I retreated from the cliff edge and made my way down to the shore path. By the time I reached the swimming area, Dad had pulled Nate from the water and was already packing up our things. "Trip is over," he announced. "No point continuing if some of us are going to act like babies." The drive home was excruciating. Dad's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he launched into a familiar lecture about manhood and courage. "A man faces his fears," he said. "A man pushes through discomfort. What are you going to do when real challenges come?" Ansel hide and cry. Mom stared out the passenger window, saying nothing. Nate looked at his feet, avoiding my eyes. As the sun began to set, we stopped at a small gas station in the middle of nowhere, still about 80 miles from home. Dad filled the tank while Mom went inside to pay. Nate stayed in the car playing his Game Boy. When Dad finished pumping, he walked to my side of the car and opened my door. "Get out," he said quietly. I looked up, confused. "You want to be treated like a man. Here is your chance to prove you are one. A real man would find his own way home. Time to man up, Ansel." I thought he was joking until he grabbed my arm and pulled me from the car. Mom returned, saw what was happening, and froze. "Richard," she said softly, "It will be dark soon. He needs to learn," Dad replied, his voice flat. "The world will not coddle him like you do." I stood in shocked silence as they got back into the car. Nate finally looked up, his eyes wide with confusion. "Dad, we cannot just leave him." I heard him say through the open window. "He will figure it out," Dad replied. "Or he will not. His choice." The car engine started. Mom would not look at me. As they pulled away, I convinced myself they would circle back in a few minutes, lesson delivered. But as their taillights disappeared down the highway, the growing darkness matched the emptiness spreading inside me. For nearly an hour, I sat on the curb outside the gas station, certain that every approaching car would be my parents returning. The rational part of me could not accept that they had actually abandoned me. This was just another test, another lesson with a predetermined endpoint. They were probably parked just out of sight watching to see what I would do. As the last light faded from the sky, the gas station attendant, a lanky man with a patchy beard, locked the store and approached me. "We are closing up, kid." "You got a ride coming?" he asked, keys jingling in his hand. "My parents will be back soon," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The man frowned. "They left a while ago." "You got a phone number to call?" I recited my home phone number, and he led me to a payphone attached to the side of the building. I dialed with shaking fingers, listening to it ring 8 times before hanging up. No answer. "Try again in a bit," the attendant suggested, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Look, I cannot let you stay inside. It is against policy." But he disappeared into the store, briefly returning with a scratchy wool blanket. "Take this at least. Gets cold at night." "Can you drive me home?" I asked desperately. "I live in Livingston. I can give you our address." He shook his head. "Cannot leave the station unattended, and my shift does not end until morning. Maybe try calling the police." But the thought of police involvement terrified me more than being alone. In our house, outside authorities were never to be trusted. Dad had made that clear. The attendant retreated to a small back office where I could see the glow of a television. I was truly alone. As full darkness settled, the temperature dropped rapidly. Montana nights, even in summer, get cold. The gas station stood at a lonely intersection with dense forest on 2 sides and open fields on the others. Occasional trucks roared past their headlights, momentarily illuminating my small figure before plunging me back into darkness. I tried the payphone twice more. Still, no answer. With each unanswered ring, the reality of my situation became clearer. They were not coming back, at least not tonight. Hunger gnawed at my stomach. I had not eaten since lunch, a peanut butter sandwich 7 hours earlier. The vending machines stood tantalizingly visible through the station windows, but I had no money. Around 10 o'clock, the mosquitoes became unbearable. The blanket helped a little, but they found any exposed skin. The gas station lights attracted them by the hundreds, their high-pitched whine adding to my misery. I finally retreated behind the building, where a large dumpster offered some shelter from the wind and insects. The ground was hard-packed dirt, spotted with cigarette butts and bottle caps. I spread the blanket in the cleanest spot I could find and curled up, using my arm as a pillow. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by every sound: distant coyotes passing, trucks, the buzz of the station's neon sign. When a light rain began around midnight, I pressed myself closer to the dumpster, its metal side providing minimal protection. As I lay there, memories of other lessons surfaced. The time Dad had made me stand at attention in the yard for 3 hours because I had cried when a bully took my backpack. The Christmas he gave Nate a new bike while handing me a book on overcoming weakness. The countless dinners where he ignored my existence, speaking only to Nate while Mom served food in silence. But this was different. This was abandonment, pure and simple. Around 3 in the morning, huddled in the damp blanket behind a stinking dumpster, I had a moment of horrible clarity. They were not coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Something hardened inside me in that moment. If this was their definition of manhood, of family, of love, then I wanted no part of it. I would survive this night and every night after, but not for them. For me. When the sun finally rose, it illuminated a different child than the one who had been abandoned 12 hours earlier. My clothes were dirty, my eyes red from crying and lack of sleep, but my jaw was set with a new determination. I had survived the night. I would survive whatever came next. I was folding the now filthy blanket when a white delivery truck pulled into the station. The driver, a barrel-chested man with a gray beard, did a double take when he spotted me emerging from behind the dumpster. "You okay, kid?" he called, leaving his engine running. "You look like you have had a rough night." That simple act of concern from a stranger broke through my new armor. I told him everything in a flood of words and tears. Frank, as he introduced himself, listened without interruption, his weathered face growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, he wordlessly opened his lunch cooler and handed me a sandwich and a bottle of water. "Eat," he said simply. "Then, we are going to the police station in the next town." The Gallatin County Sheriff's Department was housed in a square brick building that smelled of coffee and floor cleaner. Frank stayed with me until a female deputy named Officer Jennings took over, bringing me to a small room with comfortable chairs instead of a formal interview room. "You are not in trouble," she assured me, setting a can of soda before me. "But I need to hear exactly what happened." I recounted my story again, feeling oddly detached, as though speaking about someone else. Officer Jennings took detailed notes, her expression professionally neutral, except for occasional tightening around her eyes. "Have your parents disciplined you like this before?" she asked. The question made me pause. Until last night, I had never questioned my father's methods. "Not exactly like this," I said slowly. "But Dad believes in tough lessons." While Officer Jennings stepped out to make calls, a social worker named Miss Reyes arrived. She had kind eyes and spoke softly, explaining that I would need a safe place to stay while they sorted things out. "We have a wonderful emergency foster family who can take you in for a few days," she said. "The Martinez family has helped many children in difficult situations." By afternoon, my parents had been located and interviewed. According to Officer Jennings, they claimed the incident was a life lesson that went too far, and that they had intended to return for me after a few hours of reflection. Dad insisted he had called the gas station to check on me, which I knew was a lie. I was placed with the Martinez family that evening. Elena and Carlos Martinez lived in a cheerful yellow house with 2 other foster children. Elena wrapped me in a hug. The moment I arrived, the first genuine physical affection I had experienced in years. "You are safe now," she whispered. For 3 days, I lived in a daze of unfamiliar comfort. The Martinez home operated on clear rules, delivered with consistent kindness. Meals were eaten together, with actual conversation. When 10-year-old Jessie, another foster child, spilled her juice at breakfast, Carlos simply helped her clean it up. No one screamed. No one delivered lectures about responsibility or competence. On the 4th day, a family court hearing was scheduled. I entered the courtroom to find my parents and Nate seated at a table. Mom had been crying. Dad sat rigid, his military posture intact. 8-year-old Nate looked confused and frightened. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, reviewed the reports before addressing my parents directly. "Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, abandoning a 12-year-old child 80 miles from home constitutes severe neglect, possibly endangerment. Your explanation that this was meant as a character-building exercise shows profoundly poor judgment." Dad attempted to interrupt, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Ansel," she said, turning to me, "your parents have requested that you return home with supervision from family services. Is that what you want?" The courtroom fell silent. Mom leaned forward slightly, her eyes pleading. Dad stared at the floor. Nate watched me with an expression I could not read. "No, Your Honor," I said clearly. "I do not want to go home." Mom began to cry. Dad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The judge nodded. "Given the circumstances and Ansel's clearly expressed wishes, I am ordering continued placement in foster care with supervised visitation at Ansel's discretion." In the following months, my parents made sporadic efforts at reconciliation. Mom brought homemade cookies to supervised visits, weeping as she apologized for not being stronger. Dad oscillated between stiff apologies, clearly scripted by their lawyer, and frustrated lectures about family loyalty. I attended every scheduled meeting, but remained largely silent. Something fundamental had broken inside me, a trust that could not be repaired with cookies or court-ordered apologies. What surprised me was how quickly I flourished away from my parents' home. With the Martinez's encouragement, I joined the school science club and discovered a talent for design and spatial thinking. I worked weekends at a local hardware store from age 14, saving every dollar. School became my pathway to freedom, and I attacked my studies with single-minded determination. The Martinezes became my true family. They attended every science fair, celebrated every achievement, and taught me that manhood had nothing to do with cliff jumping or enduring cruelty. Carlos showed me that real strength came from gentleness, from protecting others rather than testing them. Occasionally, distant relatives would provide updates about my biological family. My father had been asked to retire early from his construction management position after an incident with a young apprentice. My mother had developed depression that required medication. Nate had become the sole focus of their attention, a burden I did not envy him. By 18, I had earned a scholarship to study architecture at Washington State University, far enough from Montana to feel like a fresh start. I graduated with honors and secured a position with a progressive firm in New York, putting 3,000 miles between my past and my future. Throughout my 20s, I built a career designing sustainable community spaces. I cultivated close friendships that became my chosen family. Dating proved more challenging as trust did not come easily. Several promising relationships ended when partners encountered the walls I had constructed. At 27, I finally sought therapy, working with Dr. Rivera to understand how abandonment had shaped my life. Slowly, I began dismantling the fortress around my heart. By 30, I had established my own small architectural practice, designing affordable housing, with an emphasis on creating safe spaces for vulnerable populations. The irony was not lost on me that my father's cruel lesson had inadvertently shaped my life's work. I had not spoken to my parents in 19 years when Nate's wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox. The invitation itself was elegant navy blue with silver script announcing the upcoming marriage of Nathan Richard Coleman to Jessica Marie Thornton. It was the small handwritten note tucked inside that sent me reeling. Ansel, we have respected your silence for 19 years, though it has broken our hearts. We were wrong that night, and every night we failed to protect you. Your father is ill now, and wishes to make amends before it is too late. Please consider attending your brother's wedding. All our love, Mom. The familiar handwriting transported me instantly back to lunch notes and signed permission slips from a childhood that seemed to belong to someone else. I sat at my kitchen counter, the note trembling in my hand, as conflicting emotions warred inside me. My first instinct was to throw the invitation away to protect the life I had so carefully constructed. I had long ago accepted that my parents would never truly understand the damage they had caused. Why invite that pain back now? During my next session with Dr. Rivera, I brought the invitation. What do you want to do? She asked after reading the note. Nothing, I replied automatically. They do not deserve my forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about what others deserve, she said gently. It is about what you need. Consider this. What boundaries would make an interaction possible without compromising your well-being? That evening I did something I had not done since I was 12. I called my childhood home. The phone rang 4 times before a man's voice answered, deeper than I remembered but instantly recognizable. Nate, I said. The silence stretched for several seconds. Ansel, my brother's voice cracked. Is that really you? Our conversation lasted 3 hours. Nate was now 27, working as a physical therapist, engaged to his college girlfriend. He spoke rapidly as though afraid I might disappear again if he paused too long. I never forgave them for what they did to you, he said. When I was 16, I had a huge fight with Dad about it. Told him he was the one who failed the test of manhood by abandoning his kid. How did that go over? I asked, able to imagine our father's reaction all too clearly. Not great, Nate laughed bitterly. But things changed after that. Dad got into some trouble at work for being too harsh with a young employee. Had to do anger management therapy. Mom started taking antidepressants. They are different now. Not perfect, but different. He hesitated before adding, Dad was diagnosed with early Parkinson's last year. It has humbled him. He talks about you all the time, about how badly he messed up. I absorbed this information silently. The image of my father, the towering figure of my childhood, diminished by illness, was difficult to reconcile with my memories. I understand if you want nothing to do with any of us, Nate continued. But I am getting married in 6 weeks, and having my brother there would mean everything to me. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a quiet restaurant in Manhattan waiting. I had chosen the location carefully, neutral territory, public enough to discourage dramatic scenes, upscale enough to require civilized behavior. They arrived exactly on time. 19 years had transformed them from the giants of my childhood to simply aging people. Dad walked with a slight tremor, his once military posture now bent. Mom's hair had gone completely silver, her face lined with what looked like years of worry. Nate accompanied them, hovering protectively. The initial minutes were awkward, filled with comments about my appearance, my success, the restaurant's menu. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We should have turned around that night," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. Not an hour later, not the next morning. Immediately, Mom reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "There is no excuse for what we did, Ansel. We failed you completely." "Yes, you did," I agreed, my voice steady. "You abandoned your child and left me to sleep behind a dumpster because I would not jump off a cliff. Do you have any idea what could have happened to me that night?" Dad looked away, his hand trembling more noticeably. "I thought I was teaching you to be strong. I was wrong. Everything I thought about strength was wrong. I learned about strength anyway," I replied. "Real strength is not about enduring cruelty or proving yourself through tests. It is about vulnerability, about kindness in the face of hardship. I learned that from my foster family, not from you." Mom was crying silently now. "Can you ever forgive us, Ansel?" I considered the question carefully. "I have built a good life without you. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. I am willing to be civil, to attend Nate's wedding, to acknowledge your existence. But trust and closeness have to be earned, and you are starting from less than zero." Dad nodded, accepting my terms with a humility that would have been unthinkable in the father I remembered. "That is more than we deserve," he said simply. 6 weeks later, I stood beside Nate as his best man. Our parents sat in the front row, Dad using a cane now, Mom dabbing at her eyes throughout the ceremony. I maintained a polite distance, focusing my attention on Nate and his evident joy. At the reception, Dad approached me while I stood alone by the bar. "You became a better man than I ever taught you to be," he said. "Not because of your lessons," I replied, "but perhaps in spite of them." He nodded, accepting this truth. "Your mother and I would like to know you, the real you, if you would ever be willing. On your terms, of course." I sipped my champagne, considering. "I will think about it." As I watched him make his way back to his table, I realized that forgiveness was not a single decision but a process. The abandoned child within me would always carry those scars, but the man I had become was strong enough to move forward without being defined by that pain. The path ahead with my family remained uncertain. Perhaps we would build something new from the ashes of the past, or perhaps we would remain connected only through Nate. Either way, I had finally closed a chapter that had been left painfully open for 19 years. The true victory was not in forgiveness or reconciliation, but in the knowledge that I had created my own definition of strength, manhood, and family. The frightened 12-year-old behind the dumpster could never have imagined the life I built, but every success, every healthy relationship, every building I designed stood as testament to his survival. Have you ever had to create boundaries with toxic family members or rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story of survival and healing resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to help others find this message. Consider sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that your past does not determine your future. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into.